Welcome everybody. Good to have you here. This is the GW/AIM weekly event. GW Office of Integrative Medicine is an academic program within the university that offers continuous integrative medicine support to different things academically, and also supervises a number of clinical activities based on campus, such as the wellness office. AIM Health Institute is a 501c3 in District of Columbia, offering a variety of low cost or free activities, integrative activities for vulnerable residents in the greater district area. So welcome to the Mindfulness Hour. I'm Dr. Kogan. Today we have Viktoriya, Karakcheyeva, who's going to give us a wellness talk, and I believe who's giving our mindfulness piece.
So I'm actually doing mindfulness. I'm talking about polyvagal theory, okay. And exercise.
And who's doing the actual meditation or actual practice? You two?
So no.
Kimberly. All right, that's great. Kimberly is great. Okay, all right. So we have Kimberly and Viktoriya, the regulars that've been here before. We'll welcome them back. So I'll start with the usual thing. We'll do a couple of minutes of questions. I have only one topic today, and of course you have seen that Pfizer is now making an official claim out there in public that the new vaccine is about 10 times more effective compared to the old one for the newer variants. And they're specifically stating this is unpublished, unverified data at the same time when there's two studies that just came out. Both studies are independent, one from Harvard, one from Yale, both saying the new vaccine is not any better than old and maybe worse. And so we have a very unusual situation where the two small studies, specifically one from Harvard, Dr. H.O., basically that's a small, but it's a controlled trial versus the Pfizer statements are uncontrolled, unverified, and unpublished. It's their internal statements. So unfortunately, we're not going to have any more updates on that for the next at least couple of weeks. Stay tuned in that sense. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm not necessarily disappointed in a Pfizer response. I kind of expected that because that's how usually pharma does business. They first going to do an internal analysis. And if they like the internal analysis, only then they will proceed with the study. Otherwise, they know that they're going to shoot themselves in the leg and they don't want to sponsor that. So, you know, that's a dirty business of running pharma. But it's not like we didn't know that, right? So this is all typical. But since you can't really get the old vaccine anyway, the whole conversation in some ways is a stupid point. I do find the fact that they're showing equivalence of the new vaccine to the old one is fine. Like, I don't have a problem with that. At least it's not a lot. It's not worse, at least according to the Harvard study. Whether or not the other study suggested potential possible inferiority, but it was too small to say much of anything. And it's also not very clear. Any study heavily depends on the population, right? So if the population was not selected perfectly, it's impossible to disseminate the findings well. So stay tuned for more. Let's go to questions. Yeah, no, I don't. It's all Pfizer. I have not heard anything stated about Moderna whatsoever. So historically, as you remember, Moderna always been a few months behind. I don't know if you're going to see exactly the same, but what I specifically said about that's a Pfizer CEO making a claim on CNN. You guys should just Google this. In fact, I probably can. When Viktoriya takes over, I'll see if I can find that article so you can actually look it up. Surge. I'm not going to talk about surge until it starts happening because everybody's saying there's going to be a surge. I'm not seeing any hint of that. The numbers going down everywhere in the entire world. There's some suggestion. There was a suggestion two weeks ago of the surge in Europe. Apparently, it was not as clear, and if there's a surge, it's very, very minor one. So what they're describing now as a triple pandemic or whatever they want to call it, you know how last year at exactly same time we were scared into that we're gonna have double pandemic with flu and nothing happened. I want to be cautious. I want to say yes, that's what other people saying, but because I'm not really seeing a very clear indication, and I'm not hearing my colleagues worried about this, I'm not gonna start yelling that everybody go get flu shot. And well, I mean, you should be getting flu shot. We've already discussed this if you're in the age and conditions of COVID. But like everything else that's out there in discussion, yes, RSV is flaring to some degree. But it's actually, if you look at the RSV in kids and you go back and look at the data from past years, the difference is this, that for the past 2 years, RSV was almost non-existent. But basically, this year's, the numbers are about the same as what they were, you know, back 3-4 years ago. So I'm not really seeing much of a grand new problem as media wants us to sort of start feeling. I think there's something going on with, you know, whether or not it's a push to get more people vaccinated, or maybe it's simply just news like a sense of urgency, and because there is no longer a sense of urgency here, I don't know, but I'm not going to say. Okay, all right, let's go to questions. Do you think this is due to an argument of urgency? All right, can I not answer that question, please? Our body's programmed to original exposure. Oh, I see. I thought you were asking a totally spiritual, esoteric question. I was going to not answer that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that as the virus mutates, even though it's mutated, our body is going to have some partial response. So every new follow-up study is going to follow an already existing immunity. It's going to be different. So part of the problem here is, how do you continuously evaluate the efficacy of what you do in a constantly evolving world? It's very difficult, actually. And so the data is going to be always a little different from before, and that's not necessarily a problem. The question would be, what do you then decide an efficacy being? And so I think that's why everybody's being pushed into saying the most important efficacy is mortality and morbidity prevention, not infectivity, which probably unlikely that any future vaccine is going to block the infectivity here. I think we have to just presume we're all going to get multiple rounds of COVID. It's just going to be mild flu-like. And the question is this just going to be like regular cold? In the past, say, 2 or 3 weeks, I had probably close to 12 of my patients, and it just feels like a regular cold. It doesn't even feel like a flu. Fevers are not high. Headaches are not bad. Coughing, sneezing, sore throat is mild. Everything mild. Yes, fatigue. Fatigue seems to be the biggest thing, right? So with flu, with colds, people don't get fatigue. With COVID, they do. But most people, especially if we support them aggressively from day one, that fatigue goes away after 2 to 3 weeks. So I'm going to leave it there. There's supposed to be a new variant coming. Yeah, there's a lot of new variants. Can we not talk about this today because we're running out of time? I did promise you guys that at some point I'll make a summary of. I'm having a hard time figuring out how to discuss this because it feels like every week there's a new variant. And the problem is 99% of them don't end up anywhere. And so I don't want to waste my or your time talking about something that's irrelevant. So let's agree that we're going to track this together. If you have particular interest in some variant, shoot me a message, better email ahead of time so I can prepare if I decide that it's relevant too, because I don't want to commit to something and then it looks like it's a waste of time. We can just have an outside discussion so that not everybody's part of it. Good question. So then Yolanda asked me a direct question. I know it'll be the last question I'll answer before I move Mike to Viktoriya. So if you had a COVID, how long should you wait to get a new vaccine? It's a great question, right? The CDC has a particular answer that they say wait for about 3 months. It's not a very hardcore answer. I would actually say talk to a provider that knows so that you can have a discussion. It is very reasonable to wait a lot longer, I think 6 months. It's even more reasonable at 6 months or so, get the titer and say, okay, well, if your titer is still very high, why do you really need a vaccine at the moment? Right? So that's another option. I would say this applies to general population. If you're over 65 with mild medical problems and your immune system is not where it used to be and you're having a lot of recurrent infections, or if you actually have an immune compromising condition, talk to your doctor, but you probably wouldn't want to then get the vaccine in 6 months without rechecking anything, because it may not really be meaningful to get the titers in you in that sense. It may be better for you to keep the titers off the charts continuously, just to maximize the protection. Of course, also what goes into play is how sensitive you are. If you're very sensitive to any mild immune stimulation and you've had problems with prior vaccines, the whole conversation may be a little different for you specifically. So unfortunately, Yolanda, I don't think we'll ever have a generic answer. And yes, the country wants us to have a generic answer, but I have a problem with that. Just like I had a huge problem with CDC 5-day stupid recommendation. I'm going to have the same problem here with recommending wait for 3 months and then vaccinate everybody. I just don't think it's needed. I think it's a lot more detailed, a lot more nuanced than individualized conversation. All right, and with that, well, it's not too bad. It's 2:14. We did that. And Viktoriya, what are you talking about?
I am talking about polyvagal theory. I think that was the request from the group, and we're going to dive right into it. Janet told me I'm taking half an hour visit. If you need me to make it shorter or longer, please let me know.
No, I think we need to make it. Kimberly, what do you think?
Yeah, I can make it I can make a very condensed version of it.
I don't need a lot of time. I mean, I know I'm just going to be answering a lot of questions, so whatever you want to do.
How about 20, Viktoriya, how about 20 minutes? Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. All right, very well. So polyvagal theory or vagal paradox came to be, it's a fairly recent kind of phenomena that was discovered by Dr. Stephen Porges, who became very interested in the heart rate patterns in the newborns. So he attempted to solve what he called the vagal paradox. On one hand, how could the cardiac vagal tone be both positive indicator of health and a negative indicator of health? So he did some research and published the polyvagal theory book in 2011, where he kind of unfolded the theory. So let me share with you some slides that I've prepared. And give me just 1 second here. And here you go. Okay, so what do we know about our central nervous system? We know there is a voluntary part, meaning that this is something in our control, and this is talking, walking, reading, driving, etc. And there is an autonomic part that is not in our control and kind of regulate other functions that are a little bit more primitive, like heart rate, digestion, peristalsis, breathing, metabolism, etc. So what we kind of traditionally knew about our nervous system and how it responds to stress, it's either it's on and we are stressed, or it's off and we kind of back to more of a balanced functioning. So it's either on or off. Well, Dr. Porges discovered that it's a little bit more nuanced. And because we have sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system within our autonomic nervous system, he speculated that while sympathetic nervous system is what gives us that fight or flight response and mobilizes our energy to confront the danger, our parasympathetic nervous system has two kind of states. And it is connected with the vagus nerve that pretty much goes throughout our body. Vagus means wandering. So it has a lot of branches that wander through our body from head to toe and cover a lot of territory. And there is a ventral part of it, or what he called the social vagal system, that is responsible for keeping us safe, connected, responsive, compassionate, being able to relate to others, kind of tend and befriend type of a thing. And there is a dorsal part of it, or more of a primitive vagal system, that activates and immobilizes us. So this is your freezing response, kind of playing a dead possum response, where everything shuts down, you kind of dissociates a bit. And this kind of facets of our parasympathetic nervous system, both needed. They're both needed for survival. And what Dr. Porges put together is that autonomic nervous system ladder. And it's right here in front of you. And he said that we travel throughout that ladder from, you know, feeling safe and social and engaged to perhaps when we are feeling more threat, mobilizing our resources, being a little bit more agitated, panicky, anxious, and then, you know, going into dorsal state. And he said the main purpose for us as human beings is not to get stuck in, you know, in the positions where it's dysfunctional for us. In otherwise, I think the goal is to help us move with ease from different state and ideally be able to reach that place of being playful, being joyous, being able to connect and feel safe with ourselves and our environment. And within the theory itself, if you look at the ladder, what you will notice, it's kind of very anthropological in nature or evolutionary based, because if you look at the development of our nervous system and the brain, you know, we have reptilian brain that is very primitive, that is really making sure on a very basic level that all systems work. And this is what typically activates with the dorsal vagus, right? Then you have our limbic system that is, you know, preparing us for that fight or flight response. That is what is typical with activation of our sympathetic nervous system. And then we have neocortex, and this is the newest formation, and that's what is typical with activation of that social response. So he said that when you face a threat, we first go with the social, with the newest system. If it fails, we go to the, you know, to the one before it. And then if that fails, we go back to primitive and reptile kind of brain responses. The problem is this one is if you stay there for too long, it can compromise your survival and, you know, potentially lead to fatal situations. And this might feel a little too busy and complex, but this is kind of how we travel through the social engagement part of it, sympathetic and dorsal state. And again, since we have a bit of a limited time today, those slides will be available for you and you can study them a little bit more in depth. So I'm going to skip over a little bit because a theoretic part is important, but what's more important is how we apply that for dealing with stressful situations in our life. So I'm gonna, well, I don't want to skip this slide because this is what we're aiming for. This is where we would like to reclaim a natural childlike state of joy. So how would we do that? So there are different techniques that each corresponds with where you feel yourself on that ladder. And it's very important, according to Dr. Porges, to be able to monitor where you are and identify what is your relationship with self and what is your relationship with the world according to where on the vagal ladder you find yourself. So let's go with, you know, I would like to go from the social, you know, down to the parasympathetic, because social is the top of the ladder. So with the social, if that aspect is compromised, what you will see visibly in yourself or other people is a lack of the eye contact, perhaps inability to communicate clearly, inability to establish rapport, empathy, or being comfortable in relationships. And interventions that are typically suggested in this state is really promoting safety. And safety can be established through a direct, comforting eye contact, pleasant facial expression, soothing voice, familiar people and surroundings. So that creates a calming effect on your vagus nerve. Playful experiences are suggested to help us recall that joyous state of being childlike, because it brings out things that are more of like an easy flow, that come naturally, that you don't push yourself, you kind of being in your element. Pleasant memories, bringing them up is also proven to help the calm down, your nervous system. Synchronized and reciprocal behaviors. This is very interesting because in communication with others, if we start mimicking the tone of voice, pace of the speech, the position of the body, we create a better contact with our, with the person that we are talking to. And that in turn creates that safety, that connection that we are looking for. Also, neutral exercises that help us to move between various states of vagal nerve are suggested, and we can talk about them a little later. Again, with the lack of time, I want to make sure I cover other aspects, and you can also post in the questions if you're interested to know more. Now, sympathetic state, we all know that it's agitation, it's a lot of restless energy, anxiety, hyperactivity, inflammatory response, and what works there is calming technique. So we all know about, deep breathing, but with vagal nerve, going through our neck and, going to our thorax and lower, there are some specific breathing exercises that are suggested to stimulate vagal nerve. And one of them is Valsalva maneuver. This one is very often used in cardiac patients with, the work of paramedics to normalize the heart rate. So what you'll do, you'll take a deep breath, you will close your nose and you'll hold that breath and try to hold it for 10 to 15 seconds, kind of breathing into your nose, but not breathing out. And then when 15 seconds are over, you open it up and you let the air out. So what it does, it creates kind of a more pressure in your chest. And what would help after you exhale is to, especially if you're doing it laying down, let's say on the floor, to raise your legs a little bit, make sure your pressure goes down, and that helps that vagal nerve stimulation and normalization of your heart rate and blood pressure. Another good one is ear massage, and actually we can access vagal nerve through our ears. So I'll try to move closer so you can see mine, but above your ear canal, there is that ridge or fold, right? And there is like a little enclave in it. So if you put your finger there in two of your enclaves, right, you can gently massage it. And that in turn provides calming effect on vagal nerve that goes, around that area. And the goal there is not to overdo. You're really just massaging the skin and you're doing it very gentle. And you can do it for 30 seconds on one side and 30 seconds on another side. It's proven that 30 seconds is the minimum. I don't have an explanation, why we cannot do less, but we can certainly do more. And when you're massaging those areas, you may feel an urge to yawn or swallow. And that is an indicator that something is shifting in your vagus nerve state. So it's a good thing. And you can do it certainly for more than 30 seconds. and measure areas that you can massage around your ear. If you, okay, hold on. If you put your fingers that way and put it on both sides of your ear and just gently pull your skin up and down in a massaging sequence. And I'm going to exaggerate it. That's not how you do it, but so you see the movement, right? So you do it gentle, and that's a measure way to stimulate vagus nerve. And again, you can do it for 30 seconds or more. And if you start feeling that urge to swallow or yawn, or maybe take a deep breath, this is an indicator that something is shifting. Humming, singing, gargling, all those things that are creating that vibrating sensation within our throat and thorax, helping to stimulate vagus nerve as well. So you all know that that yogi, do. So that's one of the ways to do it. You can just simply hum a tune with your mouth closed, like and again, any tune that comes to mind, and that produces that vibration. Singing, if you're singing in a shower, just sing when you're driving, that's a good way to stimulate your vagus nerve and calm down your nervous system. And laughter, that's another thing. We typically think about laughter as a stimulating activity, and it kind of is, but laughter also puts us at ease and helps to calm down our nervous system. So laugh often, according to the polyvagal theory. And then lastly, our parasympathetic nervous system. And when we are in that state and it's compromised, typically what you'll see flat affect, person may look pale or quiet, apathetic, depressed, may dissociate a bit from what's going on, immobility, shock, all of those things are signs of parasympathetic system kind of dorsal vagus actually kind of taking charge. So grounding techniques help a lot to bring us back to reality and help us connect with what's going on. So splashing cold water on our face and neck. It's a very good, anything connected with the temperature change, that cold kind of stimulating effect is proven to be effective. And again, because vagus nerves goes, face, neck, it kind of gets a stimulating effect on it. The 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste is a measure good technique. And we've talked about it in our previous talks. That helps you to connect with what's going on. So you can go around your room and you can do the count. Okay, I see, I don't know, 5 outlets. Oh yeah, I hear the noise of a printer, right? I feel the back of my chair, or I feel the fabric on my skin, etc. Or I smell coffee, so etc. So that helps you to be in touch with, okay, I'm here and now. I am safe. There is no need to be afraid or worried. Wiggling your toes, shifting your posture, digging your heels into the floor, tracing your hand. Those are things that are proven to be very simple, but yet effective grounding techniques that are used to help us reconnect with reality. So in addition to that, and I'm trying to see if time would allow, I want to do a few more exercises that are a little bit more involved, and they are more of a physical in nature. So if you want to try them with me, let's do it. So you can do them sitting, you can do them laying down. If you are sitting, just put, let's start with our left side. So we'll put our left hand on the top of our head, and we will gently pull the head to the left side, okay? So find that position that's comfortable, not overextending. And that what you're gonna do, you're gonna look with your only with your eyes. You're not gonna turn your head. Your head stays frontal, but your eyes look up. So do it for 30 seconds or more until you feel a sense of like you wanna maybe swallow or yawn or anything. I started yawning, so something is shifting in my system right now. So 30 seconds, just looking an opposite direction, kind of diagonally. Right, so we do that for 30 seconds and then release. Okay. And then we do the same. We put on the other side, we put our right hand on the top of our head. We, find a position where it's not overextending, but it's leaning to the right side. Again, keeping your head frontal, your eyes looking diagonally up. And we are holding it for 30 seconds or more, expecting that shift, either deep breathing or yawning or swallow or anything else that could potentially indicate something is shifting within our system. And then coming back to the center, checking in with ourselves. After you do that, you can turn your head right or left to see how it feels. And what I find in my practice very often, people come, do that and say, oh my God, I thought I have, arthritis or whatever else, or pinched nerve, but I did that and it released the tension that was built up. So very often some of those tensions could be psychosomatic, and that type of exercise can release it. A little bit more kind of advanced way to do it, and I'm gonna see if I can lower my camera a bit. So you'll do the same thing. You'll put your hand on the top of your head, and you will also kind of lean a little bit to the side, but in the same way you will lean with the side of your thorax. So you're kind of creating a C shape with your body, okay? So your head is kind of leaning on the left, and then your side is also kind of moving in the opposite direction. And then you're looking, again, you're not turning your head, but you're looking diagonally up and holding it for 30 seconds. And again, waiting for that response from your body. And then coming back to the center, checking with yourself and doing the opposite side, putting your hand on the top of your head, finding comfortable position, not overextending, and doing that C shape with the side of your body, and then turning your gaze diagonally without turning your head. So that's another way to do it. And this is probably as much as we're gonna do in a kind of a sitting position. There are a couple of other exercises that you can do laying down, but I don't think that we will go into them here, because I also wanna give Kimberly an opportunity to talk. So I wanna pause here and see if you guys have any questions.
There is several questions there, Viktoriya.
Yeah.
So
Inducing the gag reflex, another way of stimulate the vagus nerve. So it's an interesting question, because it's also about what's the purpose of gag. Some people do that to purge out food. Some people do it for other purposes. So what's the purpose of your gag? If you're doing that gagging with the intention of calming down your system, if you're not overdoing, that may potentially be beneficial. But if you are overdoing it, if the purpose is different, that can also be counterproductive. Is this
I
why?
think the, yeah,
Uh-huh.
I can answer that. So there is a component of vagal stimulation with a cold shower, but it's actually not the most important thing. The other aspects of the cold exposure have more to do with immune boosting and also the metabolism shift. So hypor and hyperthermia treatments are a bit more complex than just the polyvagal system, although it definitely has a vagal aspect. And then I think there's another question for you on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
exercise.
Which vagal exercises are best for improving motility? That's okay. And let me stop sharing here so I can see you guys. I mean, again, if our goal is to help us to move freely from one state to another, then I think each of them have the benefits somewhat. Misha, I don't know if you have any thoughts on like best recommendations in that regard.
I mean, I think the general stress management is going to achieve the same thing, to be honest with you. I can't really quite think that there's a quote unquote best exercise to improving motility. Yeah, I would say that probably it's very individualized answer. I'm guessing that each person is going to have a little bit of the differences, which would be better worked out with someone who understands you well.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because like vagal theory is one of the ways to look at things. And I don't think there is a cookie cutter in terms of, okay, this works for, this is prescriptive, this works for this, and this works for that. I mean, depending on your individual self, that could vary. And I think what's the beauty is what Dr. Porges suggested. It's really about that fluidity of the system and helping us to be comfortable moving through one state to another without feeling stuck, and translating it into our sense of self and our relationships with the world. So that's what I'm going to post. And yes, Janet has my slides. I know with the time, I couldn't dive deeper into them, but they have a lot of good information if you want to research more. And I'll post here. Thank you all.
Thank you, Viktoriya and Kimberly.
I'm up. Hi, I'm Kimberly Baer. I'm a dentist in North Bethesda, Maryland, and I'm a biological dentist. And we do things a little differently. We sort of take the whole person into consideration. And one of the things I wanted to talk about today was, because we're seeing a lot of it, especially, you would think we're seeing, especially with the temperature changing and everyone turning on their heaters, and we have a lot of mouth breathers out there, especially at night, and we're seeing a lot of dry mouth issues. It's always a problem, especially with certain populations, like my patients over, sometimes younger patients, but usually 40 and up. Most people are a little chronically dehydrated in general, and throw on top of that something like just an antidepressant or a type 1 or type 2 diabetic, and your mouth is going to be a little drier. And the only real thing we have in our mouth that protects us from the crazy balance of bacteria in there is our saliva. So when it's off just a little bit, that makes a really big difference. So some people will say, I haven't had a cavity in 20 years, and now all of a sudden I'm getting decay everywhere. Or all of a sudden I'm getting these, canker sores more often, or they're getting bigger and harder to get rid of. Usually it's a dry mouth issue, and it's, what is frustrating is the cause isn't always addressed. Instead, it's people will maybe go and start trying to drink a little bit more water, which is great, or there's some products that sort of help with that stuff, but none of these things are really going to fix the problem and help the balance of your bacteria. You kind of have to figure out what's going on. And there are things that people don't even realize, like for instance, if you use an inhaler, that is like lighting a match in a dry forest in your mouth, that it wreaks havoc. So if you need to use an inhaler on any kind of regular basis, there are things that you need to do to help your mouth sort of counteract the effects of that, or else you're going to start getting decay around your crowns. You're going to start getting tissue inflammation. There's just a ton of medications that do it, but blood pressure medications, I mean, things that you just really didn't even think. And your mouth can be a little dry, and it can just be a little dry, not even noticeable. But if you look at your tongue, you see your tongue is a little cracked. Or for instance, if you have to drink fluids when you eat, you shouldn't have to drink fluids when you eat. We do that because our mouth is dry and it helps us swallow. So these are indicators. And so what I see, I had actually this week happen, 2 patients of mine who've been patients of mine for almost 20 years, no decay issues. Both of them, like I think one was in their 60s, one's in their early 70s, very healthy. All of a sudden, they're coming in for their checks and they're getting decay everywhere. And the one was, she had started to use an inhaler. And the other patient was, they had just changed one of her medications a little bit. So, the sad thing is you catch it after there's been a rash of decay everywhere. But in retrospect, I wish I'd known about these medication changes in advance, because it really, really makes a big difference. So for instance, one of these patients was still using an over-the-counter mouthwash, was using something ACT, okay? Which is, I was like, throw in your trash can, throw the ACT in your trash can, because it's drying out your mouth. So many things we use dry out our mouth. I always say to my patients, if you're not going to use it on your face, if you wouldn't put that on your face on a regular basis, you probably shouldn't be putting it in your mouth, rinsing your mouth out with it, because we use these products that strip our mouths and just make us more vulnerable to decay and also to viruses. Our mouth is like it's a barrier. And, if we don't have the right balance of bacteria, there's just a ton of things. We can affect your blood pressure, just a ton of things it can affect. But we sometimes I think that we're our worst enemies, and we'll think we got to get it cleaner, and it's got to be harsh and it needs to burn, and it's actually the complete opposite. Our body is designed to compensate and help. But if, for instance, a patient's having decay, they'll come into my office as a new patient, and their previous dentist, let's say, not knowing, had put them on a special perio mouthwash, which has chlorhexidine in it, which is in most of these products. And it is like, this is what they train you in dental school to give your patients after surgery. Does it kill bacteria? Yes, but it kills all bacteria. It kills all the good bacteria. This is the stuff that kills the bacteria, so your body can't make nitric oxide. So, we know that from studies done at NIH that people who use mouthwash and products with this material in it, their blood pressure goes up. So, instead of really using something as simple as coconut oil, you can use virgin coconut oil that you get at the grocery store and rinse with it. And you would be shocked if you did that every night before you went to bed, how you would wake up the next morning and actually your breath would be better, because you're using moisturizer in your mouth. If you were to take ACT and rub it on your face every night, your skin would be super angry, and you would be, your skin would become cracked, and it would be very vulnerable to other issues, so like rashes and things like that. So yeah, I think people have to think, and sometimes more isn't better, especially with our teeth. A lot of these products really do make a difference, and the dry mouth issue is huge. Any questions? I recently changed my toothpaste to one. I can't really see these questions. I don't know if anybody can.
Do you want me to read them? Would that help?
Sure.
So let me go back up here. It looks like, okay, so using a spacer with your inhaler and drink after using it, I don't know, that's not a question. I think this is drinking water, not juice or alcohol. Well, I recently changed my, here's this question. I recently changed my toothpaste to the one that does not have SLS, parabens, etc. There is still a big debate on whether fluoride is a beneficial though. So I guess the question is what about fluoride?
What about fluoride?
Yeah.
If fluoride is beneficial? Fluoride would be beneficial if you only got it in the dental office in an isolated situation. There's things out there like aloe and things that work better. Fluoride is a carcinogen. It's used as a, we use it to sterilize bugs, in the fields. So I think we get most of the issues we have, like you see people and kids now with these white spots on their teeth, that's called fluorosis. And that's what happens when you have too much fluoride, and it accumulates like that in your bones. So I think and if you go to PubMed and you look at the research from the early 2000s done at NIH with the kids, the long-term studies on the lowering of the IQs with the fluoride exposure. I mean, I think that there's a lot of money behind fluoride and fluoride products, but there's so many things out there that aren't, if you eat a tube of toothpaste, it'll kill you. You have to go to the emergency room and have your stomach pumped. So why? It's the fluoride. So there's things out there that you can use that, are not harmful, and I wouldn't recommend fluoride.
Okay, so the next, I think, okay, so what kind of coconut oil you suggest to rinse? I'm assuming any coconut oil that's organic.
Just virgin, like organic coconut oil. You buy at the grocery store, you can use the same stuff to cook with.
Right. Okay, so what brand of toothpaste or tooth cleaning products do you recommend?
I mean, we have ones we like in our office. There's a brand called Rise Well. There's a Perio Clear. I mean, there's a lot of decent ones out there now that you can get that don't have the SLS and the parabens and everything in it, and that are fluoride free.
I use Biocidin brand, which is a herbal product brand that's used for combating overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine, and I also personally like the traditional nutraceutical grades, so corn, Designs for Health, Pure. They all make toothpastes that are, don't have fluoride, and the ones I use either have colloid silver and or a bunch of other stuff. That's usually herbs. The point of some of this is that there's been a strong link. Well, in my case, since I do have some Parkinson and Alzheimer's risks, there's a strong link between particular bacteria in the mouth and Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. So I use the toothpaste that's designed to eliminate those bacteria on a continuous basis.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. That's great. I'd love to know more about that too.
All right. So what about using carbonated water? Oh, that's a good one.
Drinking
versus,
it?
I guess versus, yeah, I'm guessing it's just a question of drinking it versus just plain.
I mean, I drink carbonated water. Plain water's better. The carbonation, doesn't have a great pH. It's a pH issue. The same issue with sodas. It's a pH. It's a little acidic.
But I'm assuming it's very dose dependent, right? I mean, if you drink one glass of carbonated club soda without sugar once a month, like it's not going to be any harmful.
Yeah. No, everything in moderation for sure.
Okay, that's a wonderful info. My daughter has enlarged adenoids and is a mouth breather, has a breath. How to help that? Great question.
The large adenoids. How old is I wonder how old her daughter is. I would, definitely is something to deal with because, that blocks the airway. And if she's really young, it'll actually change her whole growth pattern in her mouth and her head. So that's something that you really want to figure out the cause and address. I had that issue with my son. It was, I wish I had figured it out earlier. But these kids can't breathe.
I guess she'll need a bit more individualized approach.
Yeah.
Ms. Ferrucci, I think it's kind of hard to answer that question, how to help her without actually seeing her.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll put in rhetorical question, why put fluoride in our water? Go talk to her.
Man, it's a good question. I mean, I know why, what the thought was initially. They say that the decay rate greatly decreased. But it actually, they put it in the water at the same time we started to actually clean and take care of our teeth. And so, of course, in certain populations, I mean, I don't think, I think that there are a lot of areas in the country that don't have fluoride in their water, and I don't think that they have any bigger cavity issues than we do. You get too much fluoride and you get fluorosis, which we have a huge problem in this area with our kids, especially because they've been raised on it. Those areas, those white spots have no calcium in them, and they will turn to decay, they will turn brown, and these kids, especially in their molars, are gonna get, have issues when they're older.
Let's put it this way so that everybody puts this in perspective. Aboriginal cultures who ate natural foods that were not processed never had tooth problems, okay, until way late in life. And there's been a lot of work done by several, biologic dentists talking about all of this. So the reality is that somehow everybody's tooth got to decay just because there's no fluoride in the water. It's not a really...
Exactly.
Everybody's teeth deteriorated when the processed foods were introduced. Before processed foods, the teeth deterioration was very individual. Of course, there was some, there's not question, but it wasn't the general public problem.
Yeah.
That's very important point. Okay, so there's this whole discussion there about Tom's of Maine toothpaste. What's your opinion on it?
I mean, they do a great job marketing. I mean, it's so funny. They're fluoridated, they're non-fluoridated, they're SLS, they're non-SLS. They don't really take a stance on anything. They got anything you want. I mean, if you get the one that doesn't have any of the bad stuff in it, it's fine.
All right, similar with that.
Yeah,
right. Similar with that, there's a Hello brand with a charcoal. That's also a question there. What's your take on that one?
I like the charcoal. It can be a little stripping if you do it all the time. So it's not like I wouldn't recommend that being your daily use.
It can also upset your spouse quite a lot if you don't clean the sink after that. I will tell you that on the personal experience. I'm not allowed to use the charcoal toothpaste in our house anymore. they can if you spill out of the sink and it gets on stuff, it's not easy to wash up.
Very messy. Yes.
Yeah, messy. All right. Care to comment on use of gold and amalgam filling? I think like you talked about this a lot. There's a lot more questions. So can I quickly answer that? The amalgams, nobody's putting them anymore. If you have a dentist who's putting amalgam, fire the dentist tomorrow, today better. Because that's just insane. In parts of the Europe, amalgams are prohibited by governments. They're not something that you legally allowed to put into mouth because of the well understood harm. The gold, I understand that it's not used anymore, not because it's a problem, but because it's expensive and it's not a very strong material, right? Or is it?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's a great material to use in the mouth. It's very expensive. But I think now with cell phones and Wi-Fi and all that, there is a battery. The biggest thing is the battery issue. You just can't use metal in your mouth anymore.
Right. That's right. Okay, very good. All right. My goodness, there's so many comments. Okay, well, guys, we have 4 minutes, so we'll try to do our best here. Yeah. Christian Church in New Zealand does not fluoride, the rest of the country does. Christian Church has the same or less decay, so it makes no difference in its toxic. Yeah, I think we've nailed down. Okay. Cheryl's asking me, I guess. Cheryl, you asking me direct question, what toothpaste? That's what I said. I'm using 3 or 4 different ones. I do like charcoal once a week or twice a week. If my wife doesn't look at me strongly, I don't. I'm pretty messy person, so things like mirrors always stand. All right, you didn't hear me. She's not here today. All right, I definitely like those herbal products, like a biocidin toothpaste. I like colloidal silver toothpaste as well. But I do rotate. I don't know. I feel like there's no one particular best product, and we do the same with kids. And they actually do use fluoride once a week, I think, or twice a week. Like they have a couple of different toothpastes. Maybe I'm paranoid. I should stop doing that. But we filter all our water. They're not drinking anything chlorinated. Our filters take out fluoride. Sheila has a hand before we go there. Let's see.
Yeah, I asked a question. Is there a recipe for making rinse for the mouth?
A recipe? You
Right.
know, I would honestly say if you used warm salt water, you would be shocked after a few days how happy your tissues would be. That's all you need. Warm salt water. I mean, it sounds it's really how easy it is, but it works better than any mouthwash.
I don't use any rinse. I mean, how critical is the rinse?
Another thing, salt, is that ionized or unionized?
So you can use ionized salt and just like table salt. Like I would have a shaker, like don't go crazy. Like a cup of warm water from the tap is fine and filtered. And just take your and just like 2 shakes. That's it. I keep one by my sink and rinse, and your gums will never bleed after a few days. It honestly works for everything. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I mean, the rinse is not 100% necessary, but when you have a lot of dental work and stuff in your mouth, it's nice to have something to sort of help the cleaning process.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mark has an interesting point that in New Zealand, there's still a lot of people using dentists using mouth. Mark, I think in US, all dentists know that the class action lawsuits are coming. They're already hearing discussions behind the ground. So it's just a matter of a couple more decades. It's just like what happened with glyphosate. It's just a matter of time. And so I think most of the dentists at this point, they kind of follow ADA guidelines, but they're just staying out of this topic because they know that eventually it's all going to get blown up. It's just a matter of timing, not the matter of if. It's just when. In US, I not see. I mean, I don't know, Kimberly. Of course, you know better, but I don't see any.
They're still doing
it. There are.
They're still doing it. Yeah.
I think they're only doing it for like. I think they're only doing it for like Medicaid population when the insurance will not pay for something else and people can't afford anything else. Maybe only in those cases, but I think most
insurance will only cover for posterior amalgam. Yeah.
Yeah. Right, exactly. But I think that's the only scenario. I think that anybody who pays out of pocket to have a private dental insurance, our dentist as local dentist were really a couple of blocks away, and I asked him the same question. He's like, "Oh no, I'm not getting anywhere near this topic. I don't want to be sued in a few years." So,
yeah, it's a hot topic.
All right. Well, everybody, it's 3 o'clock. Thank you so much for being here. Janet is not here. I don't know what we have next week. Apologies for that. But whatever it is, you're going to enjoy it. Viktoriya, you don't have schedule in front of you.
And I'm good.